Welcome to The Functional Esthetician, a podcast where skin health meets whole body wellness. I'm Samantha Dunch, a licensed esthetician, owner of Skin Deep Aesthetics, author, and a doctor of functional medicine. My mission is to help you see the bigger picture because healthy skin starts from within. In each episode, we'll explore the gut-skin axis, hormones, nutrition, skincare, and wellness tools you can use to transform your skin. Welcome to the Functional Esthetician Podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Dunch. Today's special guest is Kiran Krishnan, a microbiologist and health and wellness expert. Today, we're going to talk about the skin and gut microbiome. Before I introduce Kiran, I want to say how excited I am for this interview. When I heard Kiran on a podcast a few months ago, I heard him talking about the skin microbiome. And it really opened my eyes to a concept that estheticians were not taught in school. I hope you enjoy us geeking out over the skin as much as we do today. Let me introduce Kiran. Kiran is a research microbiologist and health and wellness expert who aims to make complex information understandable to all. He has founded and scaled a number of successful health and supplement companies over the last 20 years, including co-founding and leading Microbiome Labs, the preeminent microbiome therapeutics focused brand among healthcare professionals. He is currently a co-founder and partner in 4 other companies that aim to revolutionize wellness care. He has designed and conducted over 60 human clinical trials and has publications in peer-reviewed scientific journals, has published chapters in scientific textbooks and reference books, has global patents, and is a sought-after speaker on the human health and microbiome. Hi, Kiran. Welcome to the Functional Esthetician Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Samantha.
I'm excited to geek out over the skin with you today.
Same here. There's plenty to geek out about.
Yes.
Our understanding of the skin and how it functions, and of course the ecosystem of the skin is ever expanding. So lots of exciting things to chat about.
Yeah. I'm going to have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little background about how you got started and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So the shorter version of it is my training is as a microbiologist, and I left the academic research area to pursue industry with the hope of doing something called bridging the translational gap. There's a lot of amazing research going on in the world of academics, and it continues to go on, although it's less funded now than it used to be, but nonetheless, there's a lot of fantastic research. But a very small percentage of that research actually gets translated to things that affect people, right? Because in academia, the researchers are professional researchers, and what their whole pursuit is just answering more questions. And so to translate that into something that impacts people requires a whole other skill set and a whole other focus. And I always found that I could speak the research and understand it and know what it means, and then be able to translate it to products and services and technologies that can actually impact people. So I jumped into the world of the microbiome, which was the pioneering field, which started off about 15 years ago. It still is. It's still one of the most frontier-like areas of science. And so I jumped into the microbiome space. I've focused a lot over the last 10 years on the gut microbiome, made a lot of progress there, was able to publish a number of studies on leaky gut and built all kinds of solutions and built a company called Microbiome Labs, which became the preeminent microbiome therapeutics company. I sold that company a few years ago and then started focusing on the skin microbiome, because the skin microbiome is equally as interesting as the gut microbiome. And in fact, they play well together or they play badly together, depending on what's happening in the ecosystem. And as it turns out, the skin is a major source of chronic disease beyond the vanity component to it, right? The outer appearance of it. There is a significant link to dysfunctions in the skin, which often are led by dysfunctional microbes, and how it leads to chronic conditions. And that came out of a huge study called the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging. That made me very interested in the skin space. So now I'm working on the skin microbiome.
I love that. That's why I wanted to have you on, because I heard you on a previous podcast talking about the skin microbiome. And I've been an esthetician for 23 years. And when I heard you speak, I thought to myself, we were never taught any of this. So I just find it so fascinating that the gut and the skin are so identical in so many ways, but yet we treat the skin as the skin, we treat the gut as the gut.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And then the role of the microbes on each, right? In
Yeah.
fact, the microbes control a lot of the functionality of the gut and control a lot of the functionality of the skin. And the thing is, in your training, just like in medical doctors training or RD training or naturopathic training, they really don't get a whole lot about the gut microbiome. And most skincare professionals, I would say all skincare professional trainings, don't really touch on the skin microbiome. And I think part of that is because, curriculums are slow to adapt to changing sciences, right? There's textbooks and lessons and modules and all that have to be rewritten and validated by boards and groups and all that. But the science moves fast, right? When it comes to microbiome, I think they're publishing still around 5,000 to 7,000 papers a year. In just the last 5-6 years, we're looking at 20, 30,000 new studies on the microbiome. And that's a lot of science to contend with, right? So I think you're at least, I'd say, 5 to 7 years away from any mention of the skin microbiome in aesthetics training. So programs like this become really important.
Absolutely. I do want to work on something for estheticians. I have an outline written, but I'm like, we need to have more training on this because we're treating the skin on a compromised skin barrier and we don't even realize it.
Totally, yeah. And in fact, we're going to be helping with that. As you know, as part of CIV, we're putting together a skin microbiome training course for estheticians that they can do on their own. And so any sort of collaboration you're looking for or want to do, we're more than happy. It's really about education for us, and it's about getting estheticians the latest information so they can do the best for their clients. And then, one of the very interesting areas of the skin microbiome is the barrier function of the skin, right? So we know the skin is a barrier, and that's one of its primary jobs. And then, of course, the sampling of the outside environment, which can occur as well. But maintaining that barrier function of the skin is the job of the microbes of the skin, right? And it's just like in the gut, maintenance of the intestinal barrier is the job of the microbes that live in the intestines. We don't necessarily do it ourselves. We need the signals, we need the metabolic actions and all that from the microbes. Without the microbes there, you wouldn't be able to maintain your barrier. If somebody dipped you in a solution that completely sterilized your skin for good, right? Your skin barrier would literally fall apart in weeks and you would have massive amounts of leaky skin and dysfunction. To start off, the pH of your skin would be completely off, right? So I know estheticians get good training on the acid mantle of the skin, right? That's a very, very important feature of maintaining healthy skin. But I often ask estheticians, you know how important the acid mantle is. You know that the skin needs to be between a pH of 4.5 and 5.5, which is a relatively narrow range. Where does the acid come from? Right. And that question is never answered. We know in the stomach, in the gastric system, your stomach produces acid. We have glands that make hydrochloric acid. And then in the rest of the intestines, microbes make acid, but it's the same thing on the skin. The microbes are the ones that make the acid to maintain that pH balance. And the way they make the acid is the microbes metabolize triglycerides, which are the fats in the oils that your skin produces. The metabolization of those triglycerides yields something called fatty acids, which then control the pH, right? So as important as we all know the acid mantle to be, the maintenance of the acid mantle is 100% the job of the microbes. And so if we don't pay attention to the microbes, the first thing that starts to fall apart is the pH of the skin.
And then the skin barrier goes downhill from there. And then we do glycolic treatments or peels and all these aggressive treatments. And it's mind-blowing that we don't even realize what we're doing to the skin.
Yeah, and the thing I want people to have like kind of a different way of thinking about these things. Now, some of the things that we do are controlled damage, right? And the purpose of the controlled damage is to elicit a repair that rejuvenates, right? So if you think about microneedling and all of the treatments that strip things down and so on, they're all a form of controlled damage. And the benefit of the controlled damage really comes from the repair. The thing that's important to note is that the repair function of the skin is also determined by the microbes on the skin, right? So if the skin is not in a situation where the repair function is working optimally, you're not actually going to get the benefits from that control damage. In fact, continuous control damage can lead to a significant net damage to the skin. Right. If you're using, microneedles, you're penetrating through, especially if you're going to try to get to the dermis layer, you're poking and prodding at trying to induce collagen synthesis and growth factor release, right? The thing is, collagen synthesis and the function of collagen itself is dependent on what the microbial ecosystem looks like. And so I think, step one in every esthetician's toolkit is, what do I do about the ecosystem on my client's skin, right? How do I ensure that the ecosystem is in a healthy state? And then how do I fix the barrier system of the skin? And then everything else you do on top of that will just work even better. And then even more importantly, because I think estheticians are well trained that 90% of what affects their skin happens in between your visits, right? And what they do at home. And so then it becomes the job to educate your clients what to do and what not to do at home, right? Because if you're doing wonderful things for them in the office and fixing their skin or helping their skin, and then over the next 30 days they're doing things that damage it, then that damage is going to win out 9 times out of 10 because they just have so much more time on their own than with you.
Yeah. Let's shift gears and talk about how the gut affects all of that.
Yeah, we call it the gut-skin axis. There's a few different ways to think about it and a few different connections that are really important. So number one, keep in mind that the skin is built from inside out, right? So the very top layers of the skin, the top layer of the epidermis, the stratum corneum, is basically dead skin. And so most of the skin and the functions of the skin, the structure, all of it's built from inside out, which means that all of the nutrients and the building blocks and all that come from inside the body, not from outside the body. And so using things topically to try to rebuild, the skin doesn't work as well as ensuring that all the building blocks are being delivered to the skin through the inside. And what determines that? It's the gut, right? Your ability to digest proteins and fats and absorb vitamins and minerals and all of those things, that all determines whether or not you're providing adequate building blocks to the skin. So we know that compromised digestion and compromised ability to assimilate nutrients has a definitive impact on skin and skin repair, skin growth, aging, and so on. Right? We know that if you look at a condition like acne, which is an inflammatory condition, right? And then all the other inflammatory conditions kind of fit along this cascade. So if you look at dermatitis and psoriasis and rosacea and all these issues, we know with acne, there are 52 studies on diet's impact on acne, and the studies are very clear. Diets that are good for the gut, like a Mediterranean diet, where you're having lots of fruits and vegetables and healthy oils like olive oil, it actually not only doesn't cause acne, but it reduces acne lesion count. But then the standard American diet, fast foods, high saturated fats, ultra-processed foods, gluten, all of these things actually exacerbate acne and drive higher lesion counts, right? So we know that for sure. And then just keep in mind that all of the amino acids that are required, the collagen and the elastin fibers, those building blocks have to be absorbed through the gut and then assembled in the liver and then sent to the skin from the gut and the liver axis. And the gut and the liver work very closely as part of the digestive tract. So that's one way to think about it, right? So all the nutrients, all the building blocks that the skin needs has to come through the gut, which means that your gut has to be healthy in order to break down, assimilate, assemble, and send those nutrients to the skin where they're going to go to work, right? The other way are products of fermentation in the gut. So your large bowel is a massive fermentation tank with tens of trillions of organisms, and they're producing all kinds of compounds when they digest things like fibers and fruits and vegetables and plant-based components. They're making things like short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids are very anti-inflammatory. They're reparative. They trigger all kinds of important metabolic processes. There's one short-chain fatty acid called acetate that leaves the gut and then makes its way into areas like the skin and can reduce inflammation in the skin. It can modulate the immune immune system's response. So the immune system doesn't hyper respond to things that are touching your skin. It can bring down the amount of sebum that's being produced because it can reduce the inflammation on the sebaceous glands. And it has antimicrobial properties in the skin as well to ward off the colonization of dysfunctional microbes. Then another short chain fatty acid called butyrate feeds all of the immune cells that monitor your entire skin surface, right? You've got this massive surface area of your skin, the largest organ in your body, if you will, that has to be monitored by immune cells. Those immune cells need energy. They get the energy from those short chain fatty acids, right? So the byproducts of your gut microbiome of fermentation are very, very important to the skin. And then the third way to think about it, right? So remember, way number one is breakdown assimilation of nutrients. Number two is the byproducts of what microbes make in the gut that are required for the skin. And then the third way is through the immune system itself. So about 75% of your immune system is in your gut. And that immune system is communicating constantly with your gut microbes. If your gut is dysfunctional and you've got a dysfunctional gut microbiome, you've got an immune system that's confused and attacking lots of different things that it shouldn't attack. That's called loss of oral tolerance. Right? So when you have a dysfunctional immune system that's overreactive, that means things that touch your skin as you're walking on the outside, pollen and ragweed, all those things fall onto your skin, even materials from your clothing, the components from your detergents, all of these types of things that fall onto your skin every second of every day can trigger an immune response that is unwanted. That immune response can start to lead to damage to the skin, right? As happens in areas like psoriasis and eczema and so on. And in some cases, your immune cells are even attacking your own skin cells, like in the case of psoriasis. And so that immune control, that immune training is a very important part of what the gut microbiome does that impacts the skin as well. So if people understand those three components, then they have a strong understanding of how the gut definitively impacts the skin.
It's almost like an autoimmune response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of cross reactivity, right? So you might get a microbe on your skin that's dysfunctional that may be producing a toxin, and then your immune system shows up to that area and it starts attacking everything in that area. That first part of your immune system is called the innate immune system. When that innate immune system shows up in many people, it just attacks everything in the area, right? It's like blowtorching everything. And then it accidentally presents parts of your own skin to your other part of your immune system called the adaptive immune system, and accidentally introduces your own proteins as the culprit that caused the issue. Now your adaptive immune system, which is your long-term memory immune system, thinks your own protein is always the culprit. So wherever it sees it, it's going to keep attacking it, right? That's what happens in psoriasis, right? That's an autoimmune attack. Then there's cross-reactivity where certain viruses or bacteria in other parts of your body can have proteins that look like your own skin proteins. And so that becomes what we call a cross-reactivity or bystander effect. Your skin cells are an innocent bystander to this programming that the viruses and bacteria are doing to your immune system. The thing is, all of that, there's a regulatory component of your immune system to stop any of that from happening. That's called the Treg cells. And those Treg cells are highly dependent on a diverse functioning gut microbiome. And so if you don't reprogram your gut microbiome and rebalance the gut microbiome, then your immune cells, your Treg cells are not functioning properly. It makes you way more susceptible to all of those autoimmune like responses.
Yeah. And that's why estheticians putting topical stuff on the skin, or even consumers going out and buying acne products and trying to fix it. It's like, that's why they're not getting results.
Yeah, and it's certainly not lasting results, right? You might get a temporary improvement in things, but you're not going at the root cause of it. If you have a client that has acne, that has eczema, that has psoriasis, that has rosacea, or even perioral dermatitis, or has aggressive aging of the skin, they're getting a lot of fine lines, wrinkles, especially the dark spots or UV spots. All of those have a direct link to dysfunctions in the gut, which means that you really, really have to pay attention to how you improve their gut health as well. Right. I think for an esthetician who's trained on the topical side of things, it is inevitable for you to be able to really help your clients that you have to learn about the gut as well. And then the beauty of it is like the side effect of helping them with their gut for their skin's sake is that you're going to help them with so many other issues just by fixing their gut, right? The same issue in your gut, and this is where a lot of people get confused, right? They think there's one specific issue in your gut that's related to, say, acne. Then there's a different issue in your gut that's related to, say, IBS. Another issue related to anxiety, right? It's not uber specific that way. It's all connected. It's a singular foundational dysfunction in the gut. The gut is leaky. You have low diversity. You have low levels of keystone species. You're not making enough short chain fatty acids. Those are all the uniform dysfunctions we see in the gut of people who have diabetes that's driven by the gut, cardiovascular disease, dementia, skin disorders like atopic dermatitis or psoriasis. Like all of those conditions are so different, but they're driven by the same root cause in the gut. Right. And that is a part for people to understand. So as an esthetician, you don't have to become a gut specialist. You don't have to study the gut microbiome for years and GI disorders and all that. You just have to have one or two or three maybe tricks of the trade that you can use to start balancing your client's guts.
Yeah. And the interesting part about that is under our scope of practice, we're not allowed to do any nutrition, any gut. We're not allowed to tell our clients lifestyle choices that could impact their guts. That's why I became a functional medicine doctor, because I was so limited in how I could treat clients. And the ones that I would say, hey, you should try eliminating these foods, the ones that actually followed got better results than the ones that didn't. And so that's what made me study functional medicine, because I want to be able to test for that. And it's amazing when you test what comes up, and when you start treating the root cause, the skin naturally starts to clear up.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that limitation of the scope of practice is quite unfortunate. And I think one way to overcome that is estheticians should be educating themselves, but estheticians should also be pairing up with nutritionists and functional RDs, not conventional RDs, functional medicine RDs, because I think that combination can be very beneficial to the clients, because the other advantage that estheticians have is you really get to know your clients, right? Because you spend so much time with them. A dermatologist sees a patient for 5 minutes, maybe, if they ever see it, right? I mean, so many of the issues when you go into a derm clinic are handled by the PAs and NPs and not necessarily even the dermatologist. And so the dermatologist never really gets to know the patient, but the esthetician absolutely does. And during that 1 hour, 1.5 hours that you're treating them and working on them, you're probably learning a lot about what is going on in their lives, right? What are they dealing with? What are the issues that they're having, health related and other things? That gives you a lot of insight into how you may be able to help your clients if you pair up with somebody like a nutritionist that you can work with.
Right. I want to talk about dermatologists and what the impact of prescribing medication and topicals does to the skin and gut microbiome.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. My first foray into skin health was on acne. And in fact, we completed 2 randomized controlled trials in humans, the largest probiotic acne studies that have ever been done. I developed a probiotic, which we have available on CIV's website, that reduces acne lesion counts by 75% in a 12-week period. And in fact, it was so novel that we got an issued U.S. patent for the product. And so it's a patented, well-studied probiotic. The reason I wanted to develop it was because dermatologists are putting patients on 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of antibiotics to resolve acne. And to me, there's a much better way to do it, right? So there's no reason to create such a potential devastation to long-term health of that individual, or even short-term issues, just to try to clear up the skin when there's better ways of going about it. So that was the first thing, is like, okay, we got to start to reduce the amount of antibiotics that are being used in dermatology for issues like acne. Then the second area that we've been really passionate about is eczema, especially pediatric eczema, right? Because it's so poorly managed. Pediatric eczema, the first line is usually with the pediatrician, and for the most part, the pediatrician has 1 or 2 levels of strength of steroids that they would recommend, right? It starts with regular over-the-counter hydrocortisone, but then if that doesn't work, then they can do a prescription that's a little bit stronger. And then often, because it doesn't actually resolve the problem, then they get referred to a dermatologist. And in speaking with dermatologists, most dermatologists don't really know how to handle pediatric eczema, right? Because it's just a continuous increase in the strength of steroids. There's no other solution. And we know that when you use steroids, they are antimicrobials themselves, so they will harm the microbiome of the skin. They will further damage the actual skin cells themselves. They will create this rebound effect that can actually create even more inflammation, more damage, and ultimately it doesn't resolve the core issue, which is the overgrowth of Staph aureus and then the internal immune system overreacting to the presence of Staph aureus and toxins. Right. And we're not inducing repair on that skin. Right. So one of the things that I've always described to people is that with your skin in any part of your body, if you continue to irritate it, you're not going to get repair out of it. And a simple analogy of that people can understand is, let's say you cut your hand here. If you just cleaned it and left it, it would heal. Within a couple of days, it would start to scab over, and before you know it, it's healed and gone. But if you did the same thing, you cut your hand, you cleaned it, but every day you scratched at it, it would never heal, right? And so continuous use of things like steroids on that area, and then now moisturizers. So a lot of people focus on moisturizers that have issues like benzoyl peroxides, phthalates, and all kinds of other preservatives in it. Those all are significant irritants to that area of the skin. And so you're continuously irritating the skin, not allowing it the chance to repair. Yep. And so one of the reasons we developed SIV was a way to address eczema, dermatitis. We completed one of our first trials on that in kids, in pediatrics, kids between 2 and 12. And what we saw was almost an 85% alleviation of the lesions in the first 2 weeks of applying it once a day.
That's amazing.
And that's because we're making a true foundational change in the ecosystem and the ability of the skin to repair itself.
Wow. Tell me a little bit more about your skincare line.
Yeah, it's called SIV. We only have 2 products, quite simple and straightforward. One of them is called a SIV Biome Balancing Serum. It's a serum that has basically 4 ingredients in it. There are 2 microbes and a couple fatty acids. The fatty acids are glycerol caprolate and squalane, and these are skin mimetic oils that are non-comedogenic, so they don't clog anything. We did testing to show that they are fine for any type of skin, any condition, any sensitivity, and all that's perfectly fine for sensitive skin. And then the active ingredients are the spore-based bacteria that are in there. What's interesting about the spore-based bacteria is that they're transient on the skin, meaning they hop on the skin for a couple of days, and when they're on there, they modulate the immune response on the skin quite dramatically. So they can calm down the overactive immune system. So when you put it on any skin that's inflamed or red, you start to see a very, very quick alleviation of that irritation, that inflammation. The spores have a component on their outer cell structure that actually upregulates the anti-inflammatory component of your immune system. So it can calm down the immune system. At the same time, it actually changes the microbiome of the skin. Now, how it does this, we're not exactly sure, because the spores generally are competitive against dysfunctional bacteria, but it may be that they're helping the immune system actually bring down those numbers. We saw this in some of our acne trials, and then we see it as well in our eczema dermatitis study. So Staph aureus, Cutibacterium magnesis in people with overgrowth, all of those come down, and we're bringing about some change to the skin microbiome. And then at the same time, we now have data proving that we also repair the barrier of the skin. So the SIV serum plays a very important role in modulating the barrier, improving and repairing the skin barrier, modulating the microbiome of the skin, and reducing the overactive immune response to the skin. So it works really well for eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, perioral dermatitis, acne, and then generally for people who are aging or want to slow down the aging process. We have some data on that as well. And it's a fantastic protector, balancer of your skin microbiome. Then the other one is a probiotic I mentioned. The probiotic has a profound gut-skin axis effect, but it also works like a probiotic, so it has a lot of gut benefits as well as the skin benefits you get along with it. And then if you combine the two, they're a really powerful combination for a microbiome focus, gut, skin, and skin gut therapeutics and protection.
Wow. Where's your website?
Yeah, so if people want to learn more about that, they can go to sivcare.com, SIVCARE.com. And of course, our Instagram is at sivcare. And as I mentioned earlier, at some point over the next, say, 5-6 months, we'll be rolling out the skin microbiome training if estheticians are interested in that as well.
Perfect. And I will drop links so they can click and connect with you. Is there anything you want to close with today?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I talk about is something called the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, which is a 65-year long longitudinal, meaning it from beginning to end, aging-related study. There have been about 3,800 patients, and it's been going on for over 60 years. There's been hundreds and hundreds of papers that have come out from this study. And what seems to be very clear in the study is that the skin is an independent risk factor for all kinds of health conditions, including things like osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, hormone imbalances, and so on. And you wouldn't think that, right? You wouldn't think that your skin can somehow have an impact on these internal processes. But this study has shown that. And what they've shown is that one of the best indicators of morbidity and mortality, meaning, what your chronic disease risk is and how long you're going to live, is what your skin looks like from a functional perspective. And so they use a measure of measuring the aging of the skin, looking at fine lines, wrinkles, senescent cells. So you're looking at dark spots and thinness, dryness of the skin and all that. All of those features were synonymous and very strong predictors of age-related disease states and dysfunctions. And so as estheticians, with that in mind, my message to estheticians is, if you work on your client's skin foundationally to improve the health of their skin by paying attention to the microbiome of the skin, whether they know it or not, you are significantly helping their overall health outcomes. So you have a lot more power in your hands than you think to impact the health outcomes of your patients. Yes, you can make them look better. You can make their skin look more clear and more firmer and better toned and all that good stuff. But if you work on the foundations of the skin, the barrier function, the microbiome of the skin, you're going to be improving their health overall. Just knowing that, hopefully that gives some estheticians a little more motivation and excitement about the work they do, because it has more impact than they think.
Wow, that's amazing. I always knew acne or inflammatory skin conditions were the first sign of defense, but I didn't realize that about other health conditions.
Yeah, this study is quite profound. And the authors have concluded over the 60 years worth of studying that skin dysfunctions and aging skin is one of the best predictors of age-related mortality and morbidity. So it's one of the best predictors of how much risk you have for other chronic conditions.
That's fascinating. Kiran, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Today we had on our special guest, Kiran Krishnan. We talked about the skin and gut microbiome, how the health of our gut and eating inflammatory foods affects both the gut and the skin. We talked about probiotic skincare, skin conditions, but also how the skin shows us how healthy or unhealthy we are going to end up living. Please check the show notes to connect with Kiran or check out his Siv skincare line. Be sure to tune in next week to episode 36. We are talking about gut health, the nervous system, and long-term wellness. You don't want to miss this one. And always remember, you deserve to love the skin you're in. As estheticians, we have such a unique opportunity to not only care for the skin on the surface, but to guide our clients towards deeper wellness. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with me on Instagram @SkinDeepIL. I look forward to connecting with you there. And if you enjoyed this conversation, subscribing and reviewing the podcast helps others find these conversations too. And always remember, you deserve to love the skin you're in.